2023? What did I say?
2023.
Isn't it 2023?
It still is.
It still is. My name is Todd Delmay.
And today is May 10th, 2023. And I'm Jeff Delmay.
Yeah, Sarah?
I think what really comes to mind for me is equality. And I hope that doesn't sound corny because we talk a lot about that. But when I came out, when I realized who I was, a gay man, and I thought, I don't feel the same. I don't feel as worthy. I don't feel as equal to the other people in my life that are straight, that are, and they're the same age. A lot of them were my friends, and my family, my brother, my cousins, the people that I really love and respect. I didn't feel as equal to them, and I always felt like I had to compensate for that, with my career, with, taking care of people, with doing things to make people happy, what have you. And I know that the people around me loved and respected me, fully, but did they really accept me being gay? So when I realized that what I really want is equality, and that I had to fight for it, it's not just going to happen, then that pushed me along. And I had the opportunity to do that in many ways and continue to do that. And you just listed a lot of things that we're doing, in our lives. But whenever I get to the point where I'm like, I can't do another thing, I think, well, I need to advance equality, not only for myself, but for my husband and for our son and for my community.
I grew up feeling different, but yet sort of fit into all of the typical things of living in a small town, involved in the church and here and there, and never felt that I was unequal until I got older and had come out, and even then wasn't really that driven in terms of working for equality. But it's when you start to imagine yourself in a relationship, and then you suddenly start to see all of these things that really are roadblocks. We often say that when we had our first date in 2003, we talked about being parents, like that was a possibility, but we never talked about getting married. It just didn't seem like it was in the realm of possibility. And that was, I think, the first major roadblock in my mind, for sure, was, oh, well, here are all of the things that I'm not going to be allowed, right? I mean, I had been free in many ways to start my own business and travel and, whatever. There's a lot of privilege that comes from being cis white male from the Midwest. But then when you start realizing that there's a part of you that just makes you so different in a way that you don't necessarily see, but it makes you so different that you can't have a family and you can't fit into the most central, institution that we have of marriage. And so initially when we were asked to join Marriage Equality in 2014, we jumped at it in some ways quite selfishly. We wanted to get married. That was very much for us, right? And we already had Blake, so we knew that we wanted that for our family. It wasn't until we started traveling around and we'd go to Equality Florida, who was the institutional plaintiff, would send us to galas and other networking events kind of around the state explaining what the lawsuit was about. And we would have couples come up to us who had been together sometimes for decades who would say to us, is this really going to happen? And then you realize, well, gee, this isn't just about us. We are representing something so much bigger for so many other people, that I think that awareness is what continues to drive me now. is thinking about those ways in which we have been fortunate to sort of develop a platform, develop relationships, oftentimes lucky to be at the right place at the right time, whether it's, when the judge lifted her stay, that we were the right place at the right time to be the first to get married, or when Don't Say Gay was filed, I just happened to be in Tallahassee because I was running, but just happened to be there and was able to sort of be part of a moment that, blew up nationally for us. So I think that's what keeps me going, is not just the, doing it for our family, but understanding there are untold individuals and families and couples that benefit because we're able to commit the time and the effort into it.
I think that definitely I've encountered challenges, being black and gay, but I will say I have a great amount of privilege compared to a lot of people. I also, despite being gay and and knowing it all my life, but not being out and sort of eventually coming to grips with it, my parents told me, you do what you need to do. You work hard and you're gonna achieve. Go to college. You're amazing. I had that. So there was no stopping me as far as where I wanted to get in the world, except for myself. So as far as privilege, I always felt like I was very privileged in I wasn't raised wealthy or affluent, whatever, very middle class, what have you, and even raised by divorced parents. So there was that adversity, but I always thought, hey, I'm gonna do what I need to do in my life, except that when I really decided to come out and come to grips with who I was as a gay man, clearly that created some real tension for me and the coming out process for me. But even with that, I always still felt like I could keep moving forward, and I didn't realize, I didn't pay attention to subtle racism or the subtle ways that I was looked at differently because I was a person of color. Just didn't even pay attention to that. And to be honest, especially in my younger life, my 20s, just coming out of college and you're so energetic, what have you, I probably didn't even know, I wasn't even aware of it, to be honest. Now, looking back, as we go through these moments of awareness with Black Lives Matter, with really putting it on the forefront, and really me personally now paying attention to other people that did not have it as good as me, that had a much bigger struggle, like our trans siblings, like people of color and lower income, what have you. I feel bad that I never really paid attention, and now that I'm paying attention, I'm like, oh, that's what that means. For an example, one time I was pulled over by a police officer just for speeding. I was probably in my early mid-20s, and immediately when I was pulled over, I knew I was speeding. I knew it wasn't anything major. I wasn't doing anything bad, wasn't drinking or whatever. But my immediate go-to was, Jeff, you have to be the nicest that you can possibly be because this police officer's pulling you over. I immediately recognized he was white. He approached the car, but my go-to was, you need to kill him with kindness and make it seem like you are the nicest person on the earth. That was me prepping for this routine traffic stop, right? But back then I just thought, you just did that because that's what you did. It's a police officer or whatever. But now I look at it and I'm like, why do I need to be nice to that police officer? All he needs to do is tell me that I was speeding, give me my ticket, and be on my way. But now I realize, now I understand it, right? Back then I didn't recognize it. Now I recognize it. So what I recognize is I had this great privilege, but I also recognized that I had to compensate. And that was just sort of how I was taught. And I didn't have the talk with my parents that I remember, but I do remember my mother, and maybe even my dad, maybe other family members just being like, you just need to be careful and you need to be respectful. and you need to be aware of who you are. So I do, being in a relationship with Todd for 20 years, do see the difference, 100%. Can see the difference in how people will look at Todd or speak to Todd versus me. But that's at 45 years old. At 25 years old, I probably didn't notice that. For me, it was, I think the word that comes to mind, the emotion that comes to mind is really challenging. And challenging not because we couldn't handle it or we couldn't do it. It's just I really wanted to do everything I could to support him. And not only because he's my husband, but because as a gay man in this country, I need him, and in the state, I need him to represent me. So I just really wanted to do everything that I possibly could to ensure his success, make sure he was elected, whatever that meant. That meant picking up the slack at work, picking up the slack at home, sacrificing time spent with him because he was out and about, supporting him the way I could. So I struggled because there's only so much I can do, and I sometimes wish I could have done more. Sometimes I really was a little bit just tired of the process, and but then there were other times where I was energized because I would see how people were reacting to him, and I could see the support, and also again recognize that we needed someone like him to represent us.
Honestly, I'd do it all over again. Like I'm looking forward to running again. I learned a lot in that first run, of course, but I really enjoyed the whole process. It some parts harder than others, of course, but I've thought about running for office for a very long time. I mean, I did sort of like I can't remember what it was called, but it was when I was in high school. I was part of a program that high school students came together and had like a week of putting together a government, kind of like I think they sometimes call it boys' state or girls' state, but this was co-ed, and just loving that whole experience. And I'd been in business networking for 20 years. And just understanding like relationships, and getting into the run, I knew there would be lots of challenges. It was a big thing, but I loved it. I loved meeting people. I loved being out.
Well, and the cool thing for me about the situation was to see somebody really living their passion and like really living and going through something that they truly love, no matter how challenging it was, and how much time it was spent. It was really a cool thing for me. Every time I would think, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this another day, I would see Todd speak, or I would see him canvas, or and I would look at it and say, how can I possibly not support this? Because you can see this person just loving every minute of it. The good, bad, and the ugly.
And I think, honestly, one of the reasons why I was able to love it so much is kind of going back to, when you're younger and becoming aware of who you are and feeling like there's a part of you that you have to hide. And even when I did candidate training through Victory Institute, which is for LGBTQ candidates, there's a whole section, a whole day, a whole chapter on how to run as the candidate who just happens to be gay. And so when we first filed, and the whole team that I was working with put together this, like my gayness, like right out front, right? My first reaction was surprise, like it wasn't what I had expected. And their point was that in this case, I was running in a Democratic primary voters like that. And I wasn't just running as the gay guy, like I was running against the marriage, soccer dad, family guy, which I think was something different too that people hadn't necessarily seen. And to be able to lean into that with passion and gusto, and countless people would open the door and would recognize me and say, oh yeah, you're the marriage guy. That's really gratifying. And, I came very, very close for being, outspent 3-1, right? So I feel like I was able to connect with voters. It was never an impediment. It was always part of the conversation. There are people who've said, in fact, it's something we should have a bigger conversation about, is our own community telling other gay candidates that it's just too gay. I've had no one that's straight tell me that, and yet countless people who don't live in the district, who never saw my mail or what I was doing or who I was talking to at the doorsteps, tell me, well, just maybe a little too gay. Like, what does that mean? Too gay? Like, I show a picture of my family. Is that too gay? Like, what does that mean? So I think in some ways we're probably harder on our own than the community is, because, Americans and Floridians, by and large, have come to accept and support same-sex marriage. Why is that? Why are we making that an issue when our voters, certainly Democratic primary voters, it's not an issue for them?
Well, I think for him, he was kind of at that preteen stage of his life where, he was not so involved in us, like doesn't spend so much time with us, and we are okay with that to some degree, right? We allow him to spend time with his friends or spend time doing the things that he enjoys doing, which for him, understandably, is being on an iPad and talking and playing with his friends virtually. So I think that he understood what was happening, the importance of it, but he also was okay with, you guys kind of do that, handle it, and I will sort of be doing my thing. And we did intentionally, pull him in and have him participate, and he canvassed a few times and go to events, what have you.
He's really good at the door.
He's great at the door.
People love him.
and he loves an event where he can just sort of be helpful and hand out information and what have you. But I think that he was very aware of what the importance of it was and understood it, but it was also okay with not being immersed in it all the time. Like, I don't think that was like the most fun for him all the time. What we did was, and I did was, there were some times where I didn't participate in an event, or I didn't because I just either couldn't do it because of scheduling, or because I honestly just wasn't up to it. And the same for Blake, same for our son. So that's what you learn. And I read both Michelle Obama's autobiography and Chasten Buttigieg's autobiography right before the campaign, and what a help that was to kind of hear their perspective on campaigning. And exact same thing. And Chasten and Pete didn't have children at the time, but they had responsibilities at home, what have you. But both their perspectives were, we're going to be there, fully support our husbands, but there are other things that we need to do, and we need our individuality, and we need to take care of our home and our children as well. Yeah. So there was that really good balance.
I would also say Blake's kind of come to a point where, like, he comes home from school and, there's another film crew in the living room. Like, really, like, what is it? Like, what is it this time, right? Yeah. A little jaded. I mean, he was in his first bride parade at 4 weeks old, right? I mean, being pushed in the stroller. He's been in all the pride parades, and he's been to, all of these different things. So, yeah, there's some of it's a little jaded, but I do think he sees and understands the importance. We've always made sure that was part of the story we tell him, about marriage equality, even, that, like, you were part of that. Like, he was in many of the news stories we did, and he was at a lot of the events we went to. So, yeah, he was just as much a part of it as we were.
Some of the most difficult here. What really comes right away, top of mind, is us owning our business, and we own a travel business, hospitality travel business. So our business has been absolutely affected by what's going on in the world, the economy, and especially the economy. So we've been through some real ups and downs where when it comes to just dealing with the business, with what's going on in the economy, both with the recession and of course with the pandemic and so forth, and in between. We've had some great highs, we've had some real great success, but what has been great about it, sort of whatever that silver lining is, that we have really gotten to grow together in that and go through those rough times, but remain a team, lean on each other, use each other's strength, and strategize. We both have our own strengths, which made our business very successful. But when we really needed to sort of figure out how to fix things and work things out, we realized that we can really work together to make that happen. And that, for me, parallels with what we're doing in our advocacy, because we've had to deal with struggles with our adoption, with marriage equality, just basic, equalities that we need, basic rights that we should have, and the two of us, with our strengths, have got together, banded together to fight that in our own ways. So that, in the 20 years, for sure, the financial aspect, economical aspect of it, but just going through these sort of rough times, I know if you compare yourself, and you can't help but compare yourselves to your peers and your family, their marriages, their relationships, what have you, and I've seen other couples not make it because of financial situations, because they just grew apart, what have you, but somehow we go through these rough times and we're able to work it out, and hopefully that continues. That's the plan.
Yeah.
But 20 years is a long time, and it went by very quickly, but it's a long time, and that's a lot of years going through ups and downs, but we've been able to charge forward and still be strong, have a strong bond, right?
Yeah. Well, I think some of those wins, right, the more you have the challenge and then the win, sort of gives you a bigger perspective, right? I think to your point earlier, what Jeff was saying, right? The 20 years time in your life can be a significant portion of time when you come to realize, how the world really works. And in a moment like this, where there are so many attacks coming from Tallahassee, being able to kind of put that in a perspective is hard, because it wasn't this bad 20 years ago, but look at what we have accomplished in the last 20 years, whether it was the right to adopt our son in 2010, whether it was the right to marry in 2015. Like, we've made significant strides. So you've seen how you can win. So just because there is a moment of adversity when everything feels like it is being pulled backwards, we know what to do to win again, right? It's not a permanent state of being pulled back and being pushed down. There'll be a win again. There are these hills and valleys. We have to feel a part of all of those communities. We just have to, right? The part of the reason why we are all being attacked separately is to divide us, right? It's the whole point, right? And if all we do is sort of retreat to our own little corner, we're never gonna, get well. We will eventually, but it'll take a lot longer for us to get back than if we came together, because our issues, our candidates, our positions are so like other people that we have to be able to come together and fight together as one community beyond just the LGBTQ community. We have more allies today than we've ever had before, but really engaging those allies in our work and being their allies in return for their identities, however they may differ, is critically important.
Yeah. Well, for me, that's the reason why, one of the main reasons why we continue to do what we do. And be out in the community with the organizations that we're affiliated with, or just networking, what have you, is because of what we represent. Just, the different groups. And that's rare. I mean, that's not there's not a lot of us like that, a lot of couples like us. So it's a way that people can see us, and whether they're young or old, and see that we're an interracial couple, we're, two men, gay men, have a child, we check all these boxes. But if we're out there on the forefront showing folks who we are, telling our story, then that will help them. That will help them to know, okay, this is a possibility, and also helps them to see that we are fighting for them. Hopefully that encourages them to join the fight and to do what they can. So I recognize, obviously being a person of color, what the struggles that people of color have. So if you can see me on TV, on a news story, fighting for whatever rights it is, most likely LGBTQ plus rights. Well, if you're a gay, black, straight man watching this, you're like, wow, if he's a black guy and he's fighting for gay rights, well, shoot, I can, help fight for my community and help fight for the youth in my community, whatever that is. So, knowing that, recognize our intersectionality pushes me, even when I'm tired, even when I'm, over it, even when I just want to not deal, actually get up and do it.
Wow. Jeff was working at the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in Miami, and I owned a travel agency in Pembroke Pines. And a friend of mine worked at the hotel as well, and had invited me down for the Five Diamond award ceremony.
So they did like a big party for clients. Yeah.
So on I think it was a Wednesday night or whatever it was, and I was in BNI, which is a business networking organization, and I was at a breakfast meeting at 7 a.m. just about every morning of the week. So for me to get in my car and go down during rush hour traffic to Miami to go to this event seems a little out of character for me, but for whatever reason I went, and literally, it sounds corny, but from across a crowded room, I saw Jeff walking toward me.
Yep. Well, and it's funny how things kind of worked out, because that day I had worked very early. My shift started at, I think, 6 a.m. So it was about 6 p.m. at that point for the party, and I was literally leaving. I was like, I'm out of here. But I kind of had to make an appearance at this party. So as I'm walking away from the crowd, I kind of turned toward the crowd just to look behind, and as you said, Todd is tall, and I recognized him right away in the crowd, and I just turned around, and I was like, I gotta go meet this guy, just at least to say hi. And I went back into the crowd, and my boss at the time happened to be staying there, and she said, Jeff, I thought you were leaving. I was like, I was leaving, but look over there. And she was like, oh. So which is sweet. And so I went up to him, and he was there with a friend, and just did a very professional welcome. Great to meet you. Hope you're
I want to make sure
yourself.
You're having a good time this evening.
Hope you're having a good time, what have you. We exchanged business cards, and then, I think I followed up probably the next day, knowing me, right away, and he didn't respond.
I knew you were going to put that on. See, that always gets put on record. Now,
it's the truth. That's
now you
have
to imagine it. 2002.
2 weeks later.
So, it was not intentional. It was one of those days when, I don't know, email was more complicated, and
because this was 2000.
The travel agency was a franchise.
This was 2002.
Yeah, the email was the agency I had was a franchise, and so there was some issue with our emails. I'd been having troubles, and they weren't coming through, or they weren't sending, whatever. Anyway, by the time we resolved it, it was a couple weeks later, I think. Yeah. But I knew, but I kept the card, and I definitely knew I was going to follow up. And then it just, because of the holidays and all that, it wasn't possible for us to actually get together again until January 15th. And so we've always considered January 15th to be our anniversary. It's technically the anniversary of our first date. But then when we got married, that was on January 5th but we still sort of conflate that, January 15th is still our anniversary, although we really have 2 anniversaries that show up on Facebook.
Right. Well, and one thing I want to put on record as well is that we, as much as we bonded right away, and we I think probably loved each other right away, it was not easy. It was a very challenging courtship, and I don't know if I want to put all of that on the record for what happened, but that just showed me in my life, it was meant to be, it's meant to be, and love is worth fighting for. And we fought to be together, and it was a struggle, but we did it. And pretty soon, like good gay couple, we were living together, and
we were living together, I think, later that year.
And
but actually January 16th of 2004 was when we moved to Hollywood and had like our first home together.
Right. Well, Todd was in a situation that he was not happy and wanted to be out of it, and I was young and in my 20s and had no cares in the world, and then all of a sudden I meet him, and all of a sudden he is a worry of mine, a care of mine, somebody that I want to protect and obviously wanted to be with, but that couldn't happen right away. So it was a challenge in getting him to a place where he felt like he could get out of the situation he was in, and then we could be together. And so, it took both me being patient, but it also took Todd being very honest about what was happening, and also very earnest about, it's you, I want to be with you, and I want to build a life with you. So I think for the people out there that are listening, it's a matter of being honest. It's a matter of being patient. And what I hear from people that are out there dating and sort of trying to figure it out, and they want to be in relationships, is I can't deal with this person because of this thing, or they're maybe they're in another relationship right now, or maybe they're in a financial situation, whatever it might be. Now, protect yourself, but also, if you really want to be with that person, they're worth fighting for. They're absolutely worth fighting for. And it's not going to be perfect. I think sometimes we want this very, perfect, glass of wine to be served with, to be given to you. But sometimes there's going to be stuff in it, and it's going to taste really good, but it's not going to be perfect. And that's what I try to tell people, is because people say, "Oh, it's been 20 years and it's been great." I was like, "Yeah, but it's not been always great, and it's been challenging. And the way we started was challenging, but we got through it, and it was worth it."
Well, and those early days too. I wasn't just coming as like, "Hey, let's date," and we were pretty serious. I was pretty serious.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, there was just something that felt different about this relationship, and that, it was a matter of, well, I've got to sell this home, and I'm moving here, and I've got a business, and I was sort of coming with some, not necessarily baggage, but it was like complications. I couldn't. Well, you were living in North Miami and working in downtown Miami. I had an office in Pembroke Pines, and moving to Hollywood, and so logistically, right, there were some challenges that we had to overcome. And initially, you moved to Hollywood and you drove to Miami in traffic for how many years?
Yeah,
until
at least 5 years. Yeah.
And then I finally convinced him, I guess, to come and work with me. So he joined my business, became our business, right at the beginning of 2009, which there'd been an 2008 crash. By the beginning of 2009, he'd left his job, and now we've got this family business that's being run out of our
Operating from the
home.
home, right from
We had
home,
a
yes.
house with a little cottage in back, and that was our office and one employee. So now it's move and home and new city and like all of these things. Oh, and by the way, we're now completely on our own, and if the business doesn't survive, we've either got to go back into the workforce or figure something else out. So yeah,
Right.
we've had a lot of those challenges. And then 2010, hey, would you like to be parents too? Right? And then we adopted. So yeah, again, a lot of things were happening, especially in those early years, that were challenges. But sometimes you just have to take the challenges and understand it's all part of life, right? I mean, at the end of our lives, we're going to tell, a complete story, right? Like right now, we're telling a story of the last 20 years. But at the end of your life, there will be a much longer story, and kind of the pieces that tie it all together are those moments that you have that you may be so caught up in you don't realize how it will fit into the bigger picture of your life. But as you get farther away from them and you recognize those were some pretty good times too, right? It's where we really got to know each other and really fall in love and make that initial commitment deeper and more lasting.
Well, that's really, it's hard, but I think at the end of the day, we made a commitment, and I think beyond the the love and the emotion of it, I think we're very what's the word, dedicated individuals. You know what I mean? So we made a commitment to be parents, so we are doing that to the best of our ability. We made a commitment to run our business. We're doing that. We made a commitment to each other, and for me, I feel, and I think Todd is probably the same way, feels a real responsibility to make that work. And the foundation is the love, right? Absolutely, that's there, but sometimes that's not enough for people, and that's when people split up. But for me, I feel that, and I also feel the responsibility of taking care of him, making sure that he's successful, making sure that he is, just happy, and whatever I need to do to do that, I will do it. And I feel the same from Todd. So I think we're also we're the oldest child in our family.
Yeah, we're the oldest children in both families.
Both sides, and we have that dynamic in our families. Like if you put both families together, very much so, and we have this sense of just leadership and responsibility, and that I think is what keeps me going when we're having rough patches, when we're having whatever it might be. I think to myself, I made a commitment to him. I need to make sure that I continue that. And of course I love him. And I want it to work. I want to make it work. So that's kind of what comes to mind for me as the sort of center of it.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, and I also would add that I'm keenly aware of just, how good I am, good I have it, right? Like how lucky I am.
Yeah.
I mean, I really am. Like,
Yeah.
there were, early days when there were insecurities about myself, which reflected in my insecurity about the relationship. And I think that's very common for most, if not all, relationships. But as you grow beyond that and you recognize just how fortunate you are to have someone that loves you and that you love as much, and that you've got all of these wonderful things and a life that, different and just and more wonderful than you could have ever imagined, you see how fortunate you are, and you just recognize that sometimes there are, you say bumps along the way. Well, sometimes there are that stupid argument that's like, it's not even worth having. Like, we've already done that. Like, move on, and you just sort of forget it, and you move on, and that's kind of important to to understand that what we have together is so much more important than any little bump along the road.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. You realize how lucky you have it, because that's absolutely true, 100%. And what comes to mind when you said that is, I'm very fortunate to have very good friends in my life, like trusted, I have a family. So, I go to them, when we have issues and we talk, just to kind of vent and whatever. And just about, there's I think probably 2, maybe 3 people that I can think of, and all of them say, but he is amazing. Like, yeah, he's a pain in the ass right now, but he is awesome. Like, you're not going to do any better, right? So I love that people recognize that, because of course I know that, right? I get that, but sometimes you forget because you had this argument or whatever, and sometimes it's not just one little argument. Sometimes it's days of just not getting it, not seeing eye to eye, not being on the same page, the frustration. And then eventually you sort of remember who you have and who they are beyond this argument and this disagreement or whatever it is. And then you think, all right, we can make it, we can do it, we can deal with it, we can work this out. I think we're also very even-keeled people. Like, yeah, we have our moments where we kind of whatever, but we're pretty, like, we don't lose it too often.
No. And people often ask, like, we spend a lot of time together. Obviously, we work together.
Kind of. I mean, physically, yes.
Well, yeah, but I mean, but people oftentimes wonder if that's, a point of conflict, and, sort of joke. Sometimes it's okay in the evening to, like, go home and sit in front of the TV and not talk to each other, because asking him, how was your day? I kind of know, because I was around, even though, I may have just been overhearing the conversation, but I was in the space. I'm sort of, I may not know all the details, but I sort of know how his day was, and what he did and where he went, right? So I think that's actually been a real gift, working together and being together like that, because it just provides us, an insight, into more aspects of each other's lives, which, I mean, maybe for some couples, like, that's just too much togetherness, but I think it works for us.
But also how we've been able to work through that, because sometimes being together too much can start to it could be too much, right? But one thing I've always been very appreciative of Todd is of allowing me to be an individual, being myself, do things myself, not feel like we need to always be together, travel together. And, I enjoy the times that I have with my friends, without him, without Blake, just me. And Todd has really allowed me to do that to some degree, where some of my friends are like, wow, Todd is a saint. He lets you do, and it's not even about letting me do whatever I want. It's just a matter of giving me the space to be me. And, sometimes that doesn't include him. Sometimes that means going on trips without him. Sometimes it means going on to events without him, especially if there are things that he's not necessarily into. And I do the same for him. And so that has been huge for me to be able to have that outlet, because it's kind of cliche, but absence does make the heart grow fonder. I'm sorry. There are times where we're away from each other for days, and it's lovely. Like, I mean, you get to a point where it's like...
You mean the coming back together again?
Well, both. Being away from each other and then the coming back. Because I just, sometimes you're away from each other long enough to really say, oh, wow, I really miss Todd. I miss Blake. I miss being home. And then it feels good. It feels good to come back. Mine is going to be a lot different to Todd. I'm not going to look the best in this comparison, but we're going to just go with it. I love a good party. I like a good gathering where I can dance and listen to music. I'm looking at your disco display here in the archives in the library, and I love that. I love going to Hunter's on a Sunday afternoon, evening where I can listen to music and be with my friends and just not have to think about anything in the world. And I want to think about politics and work and children and all that. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. There are other things, yes, but what really comes to mind for me is being in this space where I can listen to music and dance to it and enjoy it and be with friends and have a couple drinks. And that's just not something Todd really enjoys all the time, which is okay.
Well, if the music isn't too loud and we can have a conversation, I'm fine.
So what is your favorite thing to do?
Oh, it's almost all politics.
MSNBC on the TV.
Yeah, I've been watching Star Trek series. I've just always been a big Star Trek fan. I like those kinds of shows. It's usually when he's off doing whatever that I'm just home and it's quiet.
Off doing whatever.
Yeah, well, you know what you just said, what you just described.
Yes.
Yeah, just a quiet afternoon at home. That's because so much of my life is being out and about and going places and doing things. That for me, it's nice to just be able to sort of retreat and reset and clear the mind and think. We did this. We used to do this thing with our employees too. It's the Strengths Finder, which I think is part of the Gallup organization, and we used to use it as a part a hiring tool, but also, a team building tool. And one of my strengths is futuristic intellection, the life of the mind, and that's very true. I like time to be able to think and sort of process. Yeah.
Very different. Honestly, it sounds so domestic and boring, but we love our shows. We love to like finding a new show, especially now that you can stream all kinds of different shows, whatever, and not even movies so much anymore. It's really about finding a really good show.
Our interest in TV shows and movies probably overlaps 90%.
Yeah.
Like there's really very little
right
that he likes that I don't like,
right,
or vice versa.
Yeah, I think so. Travel, we really both enjoy the planning, travel, and going. And
family dinner nights. I mean, those just, like, I think we have a busy week. So I think last night was maybe the only night this week that we're all three at home together, and it was Taco Tuesday night, and just those sorts of traditions, and I hope Blake looks back with such fondness when he's older too, but those are really special times.